I think I have a lot to tell you guys. I haven't been able to stop thinking about making this video, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about just finally like coming clean about everything and telling everybody what's been going on for the past like 4 or 5 years. So yeah, I just want to give everybody a warning. It's I'm gonna talk about some stuff that can be pretty upsetting, I guess. So I'm gonna talk about like stalking, bullying, depression, suicidal thoughts. A lot of this stuff, like I haven't even told like my family. So I have a lot to just like get off my chest. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about how I was, and to this day, like relentlessly bullied for the past like 5, maybe more years. It actually got a little more serious because I found out that I had a stalker. This person wasn't like physically showing up at my house, but this person basically dedicated the last like 4 years of their life to knowing every single thing that I did and to, I guess, know every single detail of my life and to post it online. I guess like some aspects of that made things get like really serious for me to be on the receiving end of it. I'm ready to admit that it happened. I think that's like the first step, because I think I spent the last 5 years being in like vehement denial that anything wrong was going on, because I felt like if I didn't admit it to myself, like if I didn't admit that I was being bullied and that I was being really, really hurt by people's words, then the situation wasn't real and I could pretend like nothing was happening. But I think that this level of trauma started manifesting itself in my day-to-day life, and I couldn't ignore the problem anymore. I was breaking down and I literally couldn't function as a person anymore. So I'm going to therapy now. I should have gone to therapy a long time ago, but I'm currently in therapy now, and I'm doing therapy for trauma. So yeah, we're working through it, and I think it's because I've been going to therapy that I feel like I can stomach making this video. I don't know why I feel like I need to make this disclaimer, but I am not like 100% sure of the details or the timeline because I was the one being stalked. I wasn't stalking. So this is just like my recollection of everything that's happened the past 5 years, because it's been a lot. And there are some parts where my memory is so fuzzy because I've literally blocked it from my mind. But this is like my best attempt to sort of recollect everything that has been going on for the past few years. So I guess let me like go back and give you guys like a little timeline. So I've been on YouTube for like 5 years, maybe a little bit more than that, maybe 5 years and a half. The bullying started pretty early on. I heard so much criticism about everything that I did, and some of the things people say are so fucked up. I'm sure that everyone knows that, like, you know, you exist on social media, so you invite all sorts of opinions about you. You know, most of it is really nice, positive things, and then there's this darker side of the internet. If you know where to look, you can find hate forums dedicated to the people you follow online. And really early on, I found out that there was one dedicated to me. And a really big part of me doesn't want to admit this. I don't talk about this with anybody because I think that for the longest time, if I didn't acknowledge that this was true, then it didn't exist. And if I didn't acknowledge it, then it didn't hurt me. But the truth is that I've been running away from this for so long that it did hurt me. It hurt me a lot. People would say the most horrible, disgusting things. They would vehemently hate you for literally no reason. They would hate you for being happy. They would hate you for being sad. They would hate you for just existing. I felt like anything I did was just never good enough for the people who hated me. And it was all public. You know, it was, people were just constantly commenting and saying all these things, and I I never read them. I never looked at these forums. But it got so severe to the point where it seemed like everybody knew about them. Everybody except me. I never looked at the forums, but everybody around me did. And it was because they were worried about me. They were worried about what people were saying. They were worried about the bullying. There was this one specific incident where like I went out to have lunch with a friend and we were just talking about, whatever. And then all of a sudden he gets really serious and he's like, hey, like, are you okay? Like I've been seeing what people are saying about you. And I was so mortified. I was so embarrassed. I was like, you are a friend, a personal friend, and you have nothing to do with my career of existing on social media. How do you, a normal person who's completely removed from all of this, know about this? Like, how do you know that I'm being bullied to this extent on social media? And it was because the hate forums were kind of just going out of control, to the point where just people in my personal life were hearing about it and they were concerned about it. They would also hear the gossip. They would be like, oh, why are you friends with her? Like, don't you know she did this or she said this and all of these things? And it was just so much speculation and so much like fake rumors. And I feel like that weighed down really heavily on me for a long time. But it started to get really personal. There's this one person in particular who posted the most, posted consistently, and this person knew everything about me. And it got really scary because it wasn't just me that they knew about, they knew everything about my friends. Hello, so I'm editing this video. So I think I failed to like describe the severity of the situation with this particular person. So like, like the bullying sucked. It sucked a lot. But I think the point where it became really unbearable was when it kind of ramped up in severity. So this person in particular posted a lot about like topics that were really severe. So they would spread like confidential information while mixed with like rumors and like really malicious lies about things about like me and my friend group, about our personal lives, like our relationships, financial information, legal information. So like it wasn't just like bullying anymore for any of us. Like it got so severe. Even like family members of my friend group were being stalked. Like their Facebook accounts were being shared online. Photos of our family members were being shared online. And like I've had that happen to me, and then my friends have had that happen to them too. And it's like it was dragging now not only our friends but also friends' families into this entire situation. People were just acting like detectives in our lives, and they were just trying so hard to find like every like dirty secret. But like a lot of this stuff, like they weren't dirty secrets. It was just like factual information about our lives. But people, and especially this one person, like they would work really hard to spin every detail of our lives out to be a dirty secret. And just the way that they painted our lives with like malicious intent, it was just so ridiculous and honestly horrifying. There were things where something really, really personal would happen to me, and within a week, this person would know, and then the internet would know. I felt like I was losing my mind because it had gotten so extreme to this point where this person was stalking me and knew everything about me that I felt like I couldn't trust anybody. Everybody in the world is an enemy because I don't know who is harassing me. Whenever I was having these like really bad meltdowns, or whenever something really difficult happened in my life and I needed someone to rely on, I could never reach out to my friends, and I felt like I was so alone in dealing with my battle with depression, because I felt like I couldn't trust anybody, like I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't reach out to friends, and I just felt really isolated. There were other things going on in my life, not just this, that made me isolate myself so much, but this definitely didn't help. People said to me that you grow a thicker skin, but for me, I never did. And I was always blaming myself for that. Like, oh, why do I let, internet strangers' comments affect how I feel about myself? And like, why do I feel ashamed, and why do I feel sad and hurt? And I always blamed myself, and I feel like to this day I still blame myself for being hurt so easily, even though at the end of the day, like, it's wrong for people to say those things, but I always found like self-hatred in myself. When you deal with this for so many years, it starts to sort of like take hold, and you can't really ignore it anymore. I couldn't relate to my audience anymore. When people told me that they loved me, or when people told me they loved my content, I couldn't believe it. I was just so traumatized that it didn't sound true to me anymore. I didn't believe that people loved me. I didn't believe that people cared about me. I didn't believe that people genuinely liked the things that I make. I think 2 years into doing YouTube, I was dealing with all of this like constant bullying, these like hate forums, feeling like I'm not safe, like I have so many eyes on me constantly. It wasn't that I hated YouTube. I think I hated the negativity that it brought, because it made me doubt myself all the time, and it made me hate myself so much. And I already have issues with self-hatred. There's a reason why I'm in therapy. Like, I've had chronic depression for almost 10 years now, so I have a really big issue with self-hatred and worthlessness. So on top of that, being constantly bullied online, it was a lot. It was a lot to handle. By year 3, I left YouTube. I left for a year. I never really talked about like why I left YouTube. There was a lot going on. I think it was just all of the years of like unchecked trauma and also self-hatred that was really just like coming to a head, and I really needed to be in therapy at the time, but I wasn't. And so on top of that, all of the bullying, I was just having a really hard time, and so I couldn't keep up with the expectations. I always feel like I'm just not good enough. I feel like I'm not good enough for like my family, not good enough for my audience, not good enough for mainly myself. And then I just was never good enough to make people stop hating me. So it like really hurt my feelings all the time, and I couldn't deal with all of the pressure and all of the expectation, as if there was some way for me to be better so that I can make all of this stop. But there wasn't a way. Like, it's never going to stop. It's just a really unfortunate part of what I do. I don't ever really talk about this because it was a really hard time, and I feel like maybe I shouldn't talk about it. I was really overcome with suicidal thoughts during this time. Like, I felt really, really, really worthless, and I felt like I was chased into a corner where I didn't want to exist anymore. Like, I didn't want people to look at me. I didn't want people to know that I existed, and I just wanted to be alone. So I was off of YouTube for a year, and it just didn't sit right with me, the reasons why I left. Even though I was still just as depressed, and even though I was still hurting so much from all of the bullying, I forced myself to come back because I hated feeling worthless, and I hated feeling like I failed. So when I came back, I didn't know that this was happening, obviously, but I had this new defense mechanism, and it was to distance myself as much as possible from who I was on the internet before I left versus who I was on the internet when I came back. I think to protect myself, I came up with this extremely superficial version of myself. where I would only talk about like clothes or hair or makeup. Like, yeah, I love those things. That's why I'm here. But I feel like I was lacking every part of my personality that I loved showing. I feel like I wasn't able to show that genuine side of myself anymore. Like, I wasn't able to show myself being truly happy, and I wasn't able to show myself being excited. So I stopped talking about my true interests. I stopped talking about myself, really, except for the most superficial parts of me. And I felt so empty in almost every single video that I put out because I was dealing with all this trauma. But I forced myself to be back because, again, I hated the idea of being a failure, and I was so obsessed with proving to myself that everything was okay. And I didn't know why I was continuing to create when I felt like everyone hated me so much, and when I hated myself the most. Looking back, it's quite shocking that I was able to continue to function in the public eye for so long while not admitting that I had a severe problem. I didn't know that it was just because it was this completely normal response to trauma, to protect myself and to hole up and to just become completely disassociated with myself and everything that I was as a person. Earlier this year, I found out who this stalker was. It was really, really shocking. When I first found out, I didn't know what I was feeling. I think I took a couple of weeks to process it. As I was processing it, I started to notice that my anxiety and my sense of dread was kind of slowly slipping away. It was like the spell was just broken all of a sudden. Like when I read comments or DMs of people telling me that they loved me, or they loved my content, like it started to feel real again. And I think it was just because this like faceless mass of negativity and hatred finally had a face, and I didn't have to be scared of everyone anymore. And this person really just lost all of their power over me the second they lost their anonymity. And the second that this person couldn't command my life anymore because I knew who it was, then this entire hate forum just didn't matter as much to me anymore. Because once I overcame the biggest monster in the closet, then the rest of it, I felt like I could overcome that too. It's not to say that I stopped being scared of opening up again, but I felt like I was finally able to try to open up again. And so you can tell I started being more comfortable in who I am as a person. I started talking about my interests again, started like fangirling about stuff. So I went to therapy, and it wasn't for the bullying in particular, because again, I didn't really admit that I was being bullied. It was really just for this, chronic depression of 10 years. But I felt like I was finally in a place where I was ready for growth, and I felt like I had the support that I needed, and I felt like I wasn't backed into a corner to be forced to going into therapy like I felt in the past, but it was my own decision that I felt like I was ready to go on this journey of like self-discovery and self-recovery. And so I went to see my therapist. When I told her about essentially everything that I've told you guys today, she told me that I had a stalker, and probably still currently do have the same stalker, and that I am traumatized from it. And I think I spent so long denying that any of this was happening because I didn't want to admit that I was being hurt by any of it. I didn't want to admit that I was traumatized. But then for a professional to hear my situation and to say, yes, these things happened to you, but you're not wrong for feeling the way you do, it kind of just justified everything that I went through. And I wasn't alone in my head anymore, doubting everything that I was thinking. It just justified everything. And then I had this huge wave of realization that for the past 4 years, I put up a mask and I performed for the people who hated me out of fear. I literally gave them my life. I dedicated all of my energy to trying to protect myself from these people. And I also was so focused on the people that hated me that I didn't think about the people who loved me. And I, at the same time, couldn't understand any of it. I couldn't understand why I couldn't be myself. I couldn't understand why I didn't feel like myself. And in the end, I feel like everything was justified. Like I was just having a reaction to all of this trauma, and I couldn't blame myself anymore. I couldn't hate myself anymore for reacting in the way that I did. But I think that trauma is really tricky because you feel so lost when you're going through it and you don't know how to fix yourself. But once you start to understand everything, and once you start to understand why you were traumatized, you can work on solving the problem and you can work at it with a new perspective. I think now that I have the truth, and now that I'm able to share the truth of what really happened, I feel like I'm regaining my power, and I feel like I'm slowly starting to become who I was as a person again. I think one really, really important and really valuable thing is that I started to feel closer to my audience again. Like I felt like I was slowly overcoming this trauma, and then actually became really good friends with a couple of people who turned out to be following me for like 5 years. And I feel like before I would have never been okay with that. Like the danger alarm would be ringing off in my head, and I would be like, no, you can't trust this person. You don't know if this person is someone you should be afraid of. But I feel like I can trust people more now. I feel like I can trust myself more now. There's this like abundance of love that I didn't feel for so long. Like I think it was always around me, but I was so heavily impacted by this negativity and this trauma and this bullying that I could never feel it. Like I could never really feel when someone told me that they loved me. I feel like I can open myself up again. I really made such amazing friends and amazing relationships once I let my walls down again, and I feel like none of these relationships that I treasure so much would have been possible if I still had my walls up, and if I didn't allow myself to be open to healing and be open to other people listening to my story and helping me through it. I feel like I am just in a really lucky place in my life where I'm able to move on, and I'm ready to be me, and I'm ready to be happy. And I'm just so thankful. Like I'm thankful for all of these experiences and all of these relationships that I'm able to have now, like in my journey to self-recovery. I mean, I'm thankful for my therapist, like I'm thankful for my mentor, I'm thankful for my friends who are excited for me. I had a particularly hard therapy session yesterday, and I cried all day, and I was telling a friend afterwards like how horrible I felt, but he was just excited for me. He was like, I know you're having a hard time now, but once you get through this, what is there to stop you? There is literally nothing that's going to stop you. Like once you work through your self-hatred and your trauma, like I'm watching you become a more powerful person as we speak. And I was so moved by that. I like cried afterwards. I was so moved by that because it just really feels like I am becoming a stronger person. And maybe it took me the past 5 years. Maybe it took me the past 10 years, but I feel like this really, really long, drawn out chapter in my life is finally coming to a close. So I don't really know what kind of conversation I want this video to invite. Don't judge people so hard. And I am definitely guilty of doing this. I feel like it's so deeply ingrained in me in this point that I judge people because I'm constantly judged myself. But I'm trying really hard not to. And I think that it's so prevalent in our lives without us even knowing it. Like, you judge someone for what they're wearing, you judge someone for their favorite artist, you judge someone for whose music they listen to. And I know I did. Um, but I'm trying really hard to just have a completely open perspective and to just stop judging everybody. Like, I just want to move forward in my life, having become a better person from this experience, knowing what it feels like to be judged so hard. I'm trying to be open and receptive to everybody's feelings and what everyone wants to say. And I feel like I've been doing a pretty good job of that recently, and I feel so much happier for it. And I feel like I'm becoming a better person because I had this experience. And I feel like the last thing that I want to say is that if you make any sort of content, if you doodle on Instagram, if you take pictures of yourself, that's creating content. How many of us are living for our critics? Because it's the most dominant voice that we're constantly trying to improve so that people stop criticizing us, or we're constantly trying to improve because of negative criticisms that we get. To some extent, constructive criticism is great, but if it gets to the point where it's the loudest voice in the room, it's constant negativity, maybe you should stop living for that. And I know I should. And I had this concept of who would I be and what would I make if I just made things for myself and the people who loved me, and for the people who DM me and say, hey, I've been following you for 8 years, since Tumblr days, since before you were on YouTube. And I decided that I would make content for them. And I feel like I've been able to start to be like myself again. So thank you for listening. I feel like I can say that, at least for now, I feel like I'm really back. I'll see you guys again next week.